In today's Mr. Ballin reaction, it's a bit of a transport-themed video. The video is called What Happened on the One-Way Train to Hell. Depends what you mean by hell. Certain parts of this country that's hell, there's certain parts of other countries that's hell, or does it mean literal hell where somebody gets killed? I'm not so sure. It's a Mr. Ballin video, so you can bet your bottom dollar that somebody's going to die. Maybe this time it's the like button. Let's check out what he does to it. As always, if this is the first time being here, then please consider hitting like and subscribe. It supports me, it supports the channel, and I do appreciate it very, very much. Right, let's get into the video.
Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. And today, I'm going to tell you 3 stories that demonstrate that.
3 stories.
But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week.
Okay, Mr. Ballin.
If that's of interest to you, please offer to bring the like button's car in for a service. But make sure when you have it there, you ask them to replace the air in their tires with helium. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
I mean, filling the tires up with helium wouldn't make it float away. It's too heavy. What would it do? Anyway, first story, whatever it takes. Let's go.
On the evening of December 14th, 2024, a woman in her mid-30s named Priya got ready for bed inside of her home in Chehenkalo village, which is a rural community in central India. Priya put on her PJs, brushed her teeth, and then climbed into bed by herself. She was waiting for her husband, 35-year-old Anand Yadav, to finish his bath and then come in here and join her. And as Priya laid there, just waiting for her husband, she couldn't help but feel like their house was so quiet.
Okay.
And in many ways, the quiet of their house was this constant reminder of this really deep sadness in her life, which is, Priya really wanted a kid, but she and her husband had struggled to get pregnant. And now, they're in their mid-30s and it just seemed like time was running out. And, it's like all she wanted was a family.
What is it? Farm? Is his technique wrong? I mean, what's going on? What's going on? So it's a couple in the mid-30s in India trying to get pregnant and they can't.
She didn't know if she would actually have one. Now, for Priya, though, this was not some new revelation. Like, this pain had been going on for years. And so, like she did most nights as she laid in bed waiting for her husband, she just did her best, not to dwell on it and just think about the other things in her life that were going well.
Okay.
Like, her relationship to her husband. They were very happy and a very healthy couple. And so she's sitting there and she's thinking about that and, again, trying to be grateful when the door opens to the bathroom and Anand comes out. But he's not dressed for bed. He's wearing a bathrobe, like he hasn't gotten dressed yet. And he's acting kind of funny. And Priya, she's looking at her husband, trying to figure out, like, what is he doing? Why isn't he dressed? What's going on here? When she suddenly realizes his face is like bright red. Clearly, there is something wrong with her husband. And then before she can ask him what's going on, Anand just turns and runs out of their bedroom, just wearing his bathrobe. And so Priya, she gets out of bed and she chases after her husband, trying to make sense of what the heck is going on here. She gets outside and she sees her husband is now collapsed on the ground outside.
I wonder if he's got one of these bad illnesses like rabies or something. You know what I mean? It makes you go mad in the head and go running out somewhere, like no matter what you've got on. Maybe he's going to be salivating and everything. This is going to be interesting as well, is it?
And she sees her husband is now collapsed on the ground outside. And so Priya really does not know what's happening here. She has no sense of what could be wrong. And so she just runs over to her husband and she rolls him over and she's shaking him to get him to talk to her. But all she sees is his face is still this beet red color and it's almost like he's passed out or something, like he's not responsive. And so really having no clue what else to do, she just rushed next door to her relative's house. She got some family members, they came outside and together they scooped up the non-responsive Anand, threw him in a vehicle, and they rushed him to the hospital. And when they got to the hospital, Priya leapt out of the car, leaving Anand and her family behind, and she bolts inside. She tells the front desk attendant what's going on, that her husband, he's not breathing, he's unresponsive, he's in the car. And so right away, medical staff came charging out. They went and they got Anand. They brought him inside. And before long, Priya is running behind all the doctors and nurses that are rushing Anand on a gurney through the hospital to an exam room. They get in the exam room, and even though Priya, she's kind of off to the side, she can't really see what's going on,
Right.
but she can see the doctor who is primarily trying to figure out what's wrong with Anand. And she sees at first he's kind of like doing a couple things to see if he can get Anand to start reacting to him. But pretty quickly, she sees this doctor just kind of sit back, and there's this look of pity that comes over his face. And he turns and he looks over at Priya and he tells her that, unfortunately, your husband is dead.
Told your son to be
now,
dead.
For Priya, this whole thing has happened so quickly that it's almost like she can't
Wonder
even
what it is.
begin to process it. And so instead of, becoming hysterical with grief, her first thought is, how could he have died? Anand was a healthy guy. He's, 35 years old. He's in the best shape of his life.
COVID.
He's a happy guy with a robust social life. Like there's no reason he should be dying right now. Like what in the world happened here? What killed him? Like that's her question to the doctor. But the doctor said, he's like, I don't know. The only way we're going to be able to figure out what happened here is to do an autopsy.
Yeah.
Because there's just nothing obvious. And so sure enough, a couple of days later, the hospital's pathologist was inside of an exam room with Anand's body laying on a table right in front of him.
Right.
And this pathologist had done countless autopsies. This was, very standard work for this doctor. And so the pathologists, they went into this autopsy really not having any idea what killed this guy. But in their head, they were thinking, okay, maybe it was a sudden heart attack because this sort of seems like that could be it. And so they made their first incision on Anand's chest, and the first place they went to look was Anand's heart. But after looking at Anand's heart, they determined that no, he did not go into cardiac arrest. He did not die from a heart attack.
Okay.
This death was not connected to his heart. And so the pathologist naturally moved from the heart to Anand's lungs, which is another area that, he believed could have something to do with this death. But after checking those out, it was clear the lungs did not have to do with Anand's death. And so after that, the pathologist wound
Kidneys,
up checking all of
liver.
Anand's organs, trying to find any sign of what killed him, but there was nothing. There was no indication that this guy should have died. Now, the pathologist was a little bit surprised because they figured, by this point, they would have had the answer of what happened to him, but it's no matter. They'd done many autopsies before.
Toxicology.
Where it required some, further looking to figure out what happened. And so they moved on and they made an incision in Anand's throat. And when they opened up Anand's throat, the pathologist just stepped back and gasped because in their entire career, they had never, ever seen anything like
What?
this. It would turn out that Priya was not the only one who felt deep sadness around not having a family yet. Anand as well was just really heartbroken over the idea that, he was never going to become a father. And
He
so
took a Viagra and he got stuck in his neck, ended up having a stiff neck, and it all closed. That's why things happened. No, it's no laughing matter. Someone died.
was just really heartbroken over the idea that, he was never going to become a father.
Okay.
And so without telling his wife, Anand had gone out and sought out professional help for their fertility issues. However, the type of professional help that he sought was a little bit unorthodox. Instead of going to see a licensed doctor, Anand went to see what's called a tantric,
The
which is
witch
basically
doctor.
a practitioner of occult magic. And this tantric
witch doctor.
gave Anand instructions for how to perform this ritual that supposedly guaranteed, if he did it correctly, that he would be able to have his child. Anand clearly believed this tantric, and so after being given the
Okay.
instructions, he went out and gathered the necessary resources, and he took them home. And then on the night that he died, while Priya was in bed waiting for him, and he was in the bathroom, taking his bath or whatever, well, at some point in the bathroom, Anand performed this fertility ritual, and it killed him. Anand, per the tantric's instructions, had taken a living baby chicken, a chick, and attempted to swallow it whole. Apparently that was all he needed to do in order to have a child as he so desperately wanted. But when he swallowed this chick, it got stuck in his throat. And within minutes, he suffocated to death. And also, unfortunately, the chick died as well.
Oh my God. I mean, Why would you even try? You know that that is going to be far too big for you to swallow. Oh, my God. And you know what? It wouldn't have worked. I mean, the chick would have died anyway going into his stomach if it had got there. But, I mean, these voodoo doctors, these witch doctors, they need... I'm not saying killing, but they need to be stopped practicing whatever it is they practice, because it's ridiculous. To tell someone that needs to swallow a live chicken so they can become fertile is ridiculous. The ex-conclusion from earlier. Kind of ironic there, isn't it, Chris? I'll show you. I'll show you chicken and an egg. Which came first? Both. Right, let's go.
One morning in late November of 1979, a 64-year-old man named John Perrin walked through a park near his home.
That's when Alien was made, the first Alien film.
Home in East London, South Africa, which is a small coastal town. The park was basically a forested area that ran right along the coastline. So even though John was walking on a trail through all these trees, he could literally hear the ocean waves crashing down on the beach below. And being out here was actually a pretty big deal for John, because he didn't come to this park very often. In fact, he pretty much never left his house, because John was a total recluse. And, you know, in addition to not leaving his house, he basically spoke to nobody. He didn't have friends, didn't have family. He basically had this one cousin he spoke to sometimes on the phone, but that was it. This guy was very isolated. But today, something in John had told him to go outside and go to this park and take a walk. It was just like this kind of weird intuition that he couldn't even explain, but he just hadn't questioned it, and here he was, doing what his gut was telling him to do. So now, he followed the trail through the woods and listened to the ocean down below, and he eventually went around this bend, and when he did, he saw there was somebody on the trail up ahead. It was this young man who John had never seen before, and this young man looked really anxious. He was sort of pacing back and forth on the trail, like he was trying to maybe build up the nerve to do something.
He might have dropped some money.
John's first impression was. Now, to John, this guy did not feel like a threat to him. It just seemed sort of odd what he was doing, and so John was curious, and so he continued walking down the trail closer to this guy to see like what was happening here. You know, remember, John thinks he's here for like some really divine reason in some ways. He doesn't really know what it is. He thinks his gut intuition has brought him here. You know, maybe it's this guy. And so he's walking down the trail, sizing up what he's doing. And as he gets closer to this man who's pacing back and forth, John realizes that the man is sort of pacing up to the edge of this cliff. Basically, again, this park sits right on the coastline.
Is he? But is he like contemplating throwing himself off? Is that what that's going to go on here? And he's going to stop him. But it's a Mr. Ballen video, so he's going to die anyway.
Cliff. Basically, again, this park sits right on the coastline, but the coastline is way down below. And John realizes this guy is pacing back and forth to the cliff and then going back over to the cliff.
Shitting out, basically.
This is a massive drop-off. This cliff is like all the way down to the beach, easily a fatal fall if you were to fall off the cliff. And suddenly it clicks for John. This young man is contemplating taking his own life. He's working up the courage to jump off the cliff. At
so his gut instinct is to go down there for a purpose he didn't know what it was, and really it's to save this young man's life. But there's going to be a twist.
That's what John is thinking. The young man is so locked in on what he's doing, he's barely even registering that John is here. He's still just pacing, you know, building up the courage, again, it appeared, to jump off this cliff. And so John's standing there, not really sure what to do. And also there were these other people that were also on the trail that had sort of taken notice of the situation. And there was this crowd forming, sort of standing a little bit back of this young man, you know, not wanting to unintentionally, you know, startle him and get him to jump off the cliff. Everyone's just kind of standing there watching. But for John, as he's standing there, almost paralyzed, you know, not knowing what to do, he's watching this guy go back and forth, and then it was like everything clicked. Suddenly, John understood why he was here. His gut instinct had brought him here to go up and interact with this young man. And so John broke from the crowd. He walked up to this young man who
to help him by pushing him off. It's a Mr. Ballen video, remember?
Still pacing back and forth. And he put his arm around the young man and he looked at him and he said, "I'll show you how it's done." And then John walked to the edge of the cliff and jumped. And the young man was so shocked by this that he just stood there and he watched as John plummeted down to the beach below and smashed into the ground and died. And this young man, I mean, he's so horrified by this, so shocked.
Can you imagine it now, can't you? I was just going to the edge to see how high it was. I just kept peeking over to see how high it was. Didn't want to kill myself, and John's just gone and turned into a lemming. What?
And this young man, I mean, he's so horrified by this, so shocked, that he decided he wasn't going to jump after all. Seeing it happen, seeing John do the thing that this young man was there to do, to jump off this cliff, to take his own life, to see somebody else do it was so awful that he decided not to do it. And so as he's having this revelation,
he went like that. I'm not doing that now. East London, South African 6-year-old recluse watched a man contemplating suicide on a cliff segment and he leaped to his death. Wow. And the man fainted after Perrin jumped.
The young man also distinctly felt grateful to John, for doing what he did.
Wow.
Because in watching what happened to him, it showed the young man that in fact, he did want to live.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Thump, thump, thump is the next video. I bet that's what happened when he hit the floor. Bounced a few times. That's mad. Thought he was going to put his arm around him and stop it. I said I knew there'd be a twist. I didn't think it'd be that sort of twist. I thought he might have gone to help him and tripped and knocked him over. Something like that. But Jesus Christ. Oh, wow. That's madness. I can see why this one is truth is stranger than fiction. Wow. Thump, thump, thump. See what this is.
At 1 a.m. on March 3rd, 1944, a young train operator named Michel Palo stood in the caboose car of a freight train that was slowly going up the side of a mountain in southern Italy. Michel's job was to operate the brakes for the back half of the train. And tonight, he had to be on high alert because they were traveling under really dangerous conditions. In fact, Michel was worried they might not even make it to the next stop. So first of all, it was raining and snowing outside, so the tracks were naturally very slippery,
right?
Which meant it was going to be harder for the train to get the traction it needed to go up the mountain. Second, the train's engine wasn't working as well as normal. And that was in large part because the coal the train company had to use was this really cheap, crappy kind of coal. Because this is 1944, World War II is raging, and a coal shortage had been created as a result of that, because all the good coal was being shipped off to be used in the war.
That could be a coal war. Hey, not a cold war, a coal war. Can't do a video of at least one dad joke.
And so, this train company had the bad coal. And then finally, the train was just way too heavy. Even though it was only supposed to be carrying the, small crew and the freight, the reality is there were over 500 stowaways on board weighing the train down. Again, this is World War II. There are all these people that are trying to flee war-torn parts of the world, and one of the ways they would do that is by stowing away on trains. And now Michel and the other crew, they were aware of these stowaways. It was not subtle. They're literally in the cars, they're on top of the cars, and they're just trying to make their way into Italy to get away from, war-torn parts of the world.
As you would.
And Michel and the other crew, they were supposed to call security and tell these
but they
people
wanted to
get
help
off the train, but they didn't do that. They felt bad. And they sort of felt like, allowing these people to make their escape was, a morally good thing.
Right thing to do,
But tonight, between the horrible weather, making the tracks slick, and, the coal that was not very good and sort of made the engine not work
and
the
weight.
And all this additional weight from the stowaways.
This is shaping up to be Final Destination. All these elements are going to come together in one go and make something bad. Are you a stowaway if they know you're there? That's a very excellent point, Chris.
It just seemed to Michel like if there was ever going to be a time that this train could not make it up the mountain, it was going to be tonight. And so the reason he's on high alert is if the train reached a point where it could not go any higher for any of the reasons I've just told you, the train would start to backslide. And that's incredibly dangerous, and it would be on Michel and also the engineers at the front of the train to hit the brakes and stop the slide.
I've seen this happen on Gordon's Hill on Thomas the Tank Engine, and it's not pretty when the train has to go backwards, because not every single train can get up there with the carriages.
So Michel, he's on high alert. He's got the lever for the brakes. He's watching for any sign of the train slowing down, something like that. And they begin to make their ascent up this mountain up ahead. And at first, it's going relatively fine, but it was just very clear to Michel, who knew this train well, that it was struggling to get up the tracks. But he saw up ahead there was this tunnel they would have to pass through before they made the trip the rest of the way up and over the mountain. Okay. And Michel's thinking, great, the tunnel is going to provide us dry, clean tracks where the train, if we just get into that tunnel, we can sort of get some momentum, get through the tunnel and ride that momentum, because we know the tracks are going to be good, up and over the rest of the way. And so Michel he's anxiously watching as the train is sort of sputtering its way up towards this tunnel. He knows that's going to be the key. Just get to that tunnel and we'll be able to get over this mountain, no problem. And so up they go, inching their way, and he sees the front of the train goes into the tunnel, and right away he feels like the train's gaining a little bit of speed here as more and more of the train is getting onto those dry tracks in the tunnel.
Physics.
And they're moving right along, but then sort of inexplicably, the train begins to slow down as the train is, again, entering into this tunnel. Remember, it's late at night, he can't really see what's going on, he can just tell that there's the tunnel, the train's going in, but we're slowing down here. And in fact, by the time that the caboose, where Michel was about to enter into the train, the last car here, the train had finally slowed down so much that the train actually came to a stop with Michel and the caboose right outside the tunnel. So, 99% of the train is in the tunnel, Michel and the caboose are outside. The train is now fully stopped. Now, generally speaking, the conductor, who was situated in the very front car of the train, was overall in charge of the train. And so in any sort of emergency situation, it was often on the conductor to sort of make the call about what the crew was going to do in response.
Okay.
Now, the train was clearly not backsliding. There wasn't an active emergency here. But Michel knew that this is wrong. There really wasn't a clear reason they should be stopped here. If anything, again, this tunnel represented their best chance to move quickly and gain momentum and ride up and over this mountain. And so Michel does not know why they're stopped, but clearly there's some sort of issue. However, Michel knows from his training that what he needs to do is still be wary of the brake here, because for all he knows, maybe there is some issue with the train and it is backsliding, but it's just slow. And so he needs to be ready to hit the brakes. And so what Michel did is he held the brake and waited for a signal from the conductor. Basically, the conductor would blow a series of whistles that Michel would be able to translate that would tell him what to do.
That
whether
Morse
it was,
code.
Lock the brakes or come up and talk to me or any number of different things he might need to do in this situation. And so Michel, he's just sitting there waiting for the train whistle, but there's nothing. There's just quiet. There's no other sound except for the idling engine, towards the front of the train. And so Michel, he just started to have this bad feeling that this doesn't make sense. There's no good reason why we've stopped here. And so Michel, operating on gut instinct here, despite not getting any signal from the conductor, no whistles, no anything, he abandoned the caboose, he abandoned the brake station, and began walking from the caboose basically up the center of the train, going into the next car. And when he got into the next car, it's totally dark because it's 1 a.m. This car is the first car that he's walking into that's in the tunnel, so it's very dark. And he did have a flashlight, but he didn't want to shine it on the people who are sleeping in here because there's hundreds of stowaways. These people have had very bad luck. They just want to get out of the country. And so as quietly as he could, he's walking through the aisle of this next train car. And, he doesn't notice anything. Everybody is asleep for the most part. And he's walking along. And as he gets to the next train car, he realizes he's starting to hear a new sound. And it's not coming from in the train. It's coming from somewhere outside in the tunnel. It's like this loud thumping sound. Something is hitting the rocks on the side of the tracks
It's been a
somewhere
landslide.
in the tunnel. And Michel, he doesn't know what it is. He still doesn't know what's going on. He hasn't discovered any sign of, what has actually happened here. And so he just keeps on walking. And as he goes into the next car, he continues to hear all these thumping sounds somewhere outside.
I reckon there's a landslide happening and the bridge is collapsing. That's my guess.
Train's still not moving. There's no whistles from the conductor. By the time he's about halfway down that next train car, he's now into the second car he's investigating, he realizes that in addition to the odd thumping sound and the lack of movement and lack of anything really going on in this tunnel, he also realizes that the car itself that he is in is very quiet. Remember, there's basically dozens of people in each of these cars kind of laying on each other, sleeping as they make their way into Italy. And so for the first time, Michel turned on his flashlight and he's aiming it at the ground right in front of him. And he turned and began to scan all the stowaways sleeping in this car. And what he saw was so horrifying, he dropped the flashlight, turned, and ran out of the tunnel.
Why?
It would turn out Michel was right to be concerned that this train might not be able to make it up this mountain. By the time the train sputtered into that tunnel, despite the fact that, yes, the conditions were much better in the tunnel for the train to maintain speed and momentum, despite that, the other factors were too much to overcome. The train was too heavy from all the stowaways, and the coal was quite bad, so the engine was not as powerful as it normally would be. And so even though the tracks were not slick, it was just too much. And so the train ground to a halt inside of the tunnel. And so what needed to happen as soon as the train came to a stop like that is the conductor and the crew at the front of the train, they needed to basically jumpstart the train. They needed to put as much coal as they could into the furnace to get this engine churning enough that it could pick up speed again and continue their journey. They basically needed to rev the engine, if you will, and really fire this engine up and get it going. But in order to do that, they had to put a huge amount of this coal into the furnace to make that jumpstart happen. Because again, this coal is not high quality. It doesn't burn as well, it's not as efficient. And so basically what could have been accomplished with 2 times the amount of coal, you needed like 10 times the amount of this bad coal to do the same thing. But one of the byproducts of burning this type of coal, really coal in general, but especially this cheap kind of coal,
everyone.
and especially this much of this cheap kind of coal, is it produces a ton of carbon monoxide. And that filled this tunnel. Michel was outside of the tunnel. His caboose was the one car that was not in the tunnel.
Everyone inside's dead.
But everybody else on this train was suddenly being exposed to a huge amount of poisonous, lethal gas. And it killed virtually everybody on this train very quickly. Those thumping sounds that Michel was hearing were the sounds of people's bodies after they had died rolling off the train and falling to the ground. When he walked through the train car and looked around, the reason it was so quiet is everybody in these train cars were dead. Out of the approximately 600 stowaways and crew who had been on board this train, 521 were found dead.
That's mad. And they were just trying to get out of the country, man, because of the war. And basically, with it being the World War, he's done Hitler's job for them. You know what I mean? They wouldn't come in my gas chamber. Yeah, no, we get on a train instead. Jesus Christ. I tell you what, the most shocking one is that one where his conscience took him down to the side of the cliff. And then he showed the guy how to kill himself. Like, that's going to be, like, really productive. I swear, these Truth Stranger Than Fiction videos, they're getting weirder. Where's he getting his stories from, Mr. Ballin? I like to read some of these things. That was mad. That was mad, mad, mad. More carbon monoxide poisoning stories. Anyway, what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to check out the original video. Give it a like, give it a subscribe, give Mr. Ballin all the props because he's a great storyteller. And I'll see you all next time.